Picture this. It is 7:15 in the evening. Dinner is getting cold. You have asked your child three times to come to the table. And now what started as a simple request has somehow turned into a full negotiation. Tears on both sides, and exhaustion so deep you forget why any of this even matters. You are not a bad parent. You are a loving, devoted, trying your hardest parent. And yet somehow the harder you try, the more chaotic everything feels. Now picture a different home. Same age child. Same evening hour. No raised voices. No threats. No countdown from 10. The child simply moves, settles, and the family eats together in something that can only be described as quiet dignity. What is different? Not the child's personality. Not the neighborhood. Not the income. What is different is the philosophy running silently beneath that household. One that most Western parents were simply never introduced to. Today that changes. By the end of this video, you are going to walk away with one foundational concept and 3 precise tools that form the backbone of Japanese childhood discipline. A system so quiet, so consistent, and so profoundly effective that child psychologists at institutions like Harvard and Stanford have begun studying it only in the last 2 decades, despite the fact that Japanese families have been living it for centuries. Here is what nobody tells you about the way most Western children are raised. The dominant model of discipline in Western households is what developmental psychologists call a reactive model. Something goes wrong and then the parent responds. The child misbehaves and then the correction comes. The rule gets broken and then the consequence follows. And on the surface, this sounds completely logical. Of course you respond when something happens. What else would you do? But here is the uncomfortable truth hiding inside that logic. A reactive system trains a child to associate behavior with external pressure. It teaches them that the reason to act correctly is because something bad will happen if they do not. And what happens when that external pressure is removed? When you are not in the room. When they are older and you are not there to count to 3. The behavior does not hold because the behavior was never truly theirs. It was borrowed from your authority, not built into their character. Researchers studying childhood behavioral development have found something striking. Children raised in predominantly reactive disciplinary environments show significantly higher rates of anxiety during transitions. Starting school, navigating friendships, handling failure, because they have been trained to look outward for signals about how to behave, rather than inward. They are, in the most compassionate way possible, dependent on external structure to feel regulated. And in a world that grows increasingly unpredictable as they age, that dependency becomes a quiet crisis. Japanese parenting philosophy identified this problem centuries before Western psychology had the language for it. And the solution they built is almost disarmingly simple. The concept at the center of Japanese discipline is not punishment. It is not reward charts. It is not even communication in the way Western parents typically understand it. The concept is called Kodawari. And while it has no perfect English translation, the closest approximation is this: an uncompromising personal standard. A deep, almost spiritual commitment to doing something with full attention and full care, simply because that is the right way it deserves to be done. In a Japanese household, Kodawari is not taught through lectures. It is not explained in a family meeting. It is absorbed. A child watches their parent fold a piece of clothing slowly and with precision. They watch the way their father places his shoes at the entrance. Not thrown, not kicked off, but set down with intention. They observe their mother preparing a simple meal as though each step carries meaning, because in her mind it does. Nobody says, "Watch me and learn discipline." Nobody needs to. The child's nervous system absorbs the standard through thousands of small, repeated observations. This is what developmental psychologists now call observational moral learning. The process by which children internalize values not through instruction, but through witnessing. And the profound insight embedded in Kodawari is this: children do not rise to the standard you explain to them. They rise to the standard they see lived in front of them every single day. This is the secret. Not a technique. Not a script. A standard. And once you understand that, the 3 tools that follow will make complete and immediate sense. So what does this actually look like inside a real home? Let me show you exactly. The first tool is called Shitsuke. In Japanese, this word is often translated as discipline, but that translation loses something essential. Shitsuke does not mean discipline in the corrective sense. It means formation. It refers to the deliberate, daily repetition of small physical actions until those actions become the child's natural, automatic expression of self-respect. In practical terms, Shitsuke looks like this. Every morning, without negotiation, without sticker charts, and without the threat of lost screen time, a Japanese child makes their sleeping space tidy. They place their school materials by the door. They eat breakfast at the table and return their dishes. Not because they were punished last time they forgot, but because these sequences of action have been repeated so consistently, so calmly, and with such quiet parental expectation, that doing them has become part of who the child understands themselves to be. The Western instinct when seeing this is to ask, but how do you get them to do it in the first place? And the Japanese answer to that question is almost philosophical in its simplicity. You do not get them to do it. You simply do it with them. Every day. Without drama. Without reward. You do it together until togetherness becomes ritual, and ritual becomes identity. Neuroscience gives this a name, habit loop consolidation, but Japanese parents have been practicing it for generations without needing to name it at all. Before we go further, does any of this remind you of how you were raised? Or perhaps of what you wish had been different? Hold that thought, because the next two tools are going to land very differently depending on your answer. Stay with me. The second tool dismantles one of the most deeply held assumptions in Western parenting philosophy. In the West, there is a widespread belief that discipline and warmth exist on opposite ends of a spectrum. That to be firm, you must be less warm. That to be nurturing, you must relax the rules. Japanese developmental psychology does not recognize this as a real tension. In fact, it identifies this assumed trade-off as the source of much of the inconsistency Western parents experience. The concept here is Amae, a Japanese psychological term coined by psychiatrist Takeo Doi, describing the deeply human need to feel safe enough to depend on another person. In the context of parenting, Amae is the understanding that a child who feels unconditionally secure in their belonging to you will self-regulate far more effectively than a child who is managing a background anxiety about your approval. What this means in practice is that Japanese parents do not withdraw warmth as a disciplinary tool. They do not go cold. They do not do the silent treatment as punishment. Instead, the correction is delivered within an unbroken atmosphere of belonging. The message is never, I am pulling away from you because of your behavior. The message, felt rather than spoken, is always you belong here unconditionally. And precisely because you belong here, we hold this standard together. Child attachment researchers have consistently found that children with secure attachment styles show dramatically higher capacities for self-regulation, frustration tolerance, and long-term emotional resilience. Amae is not permissiveness. It is the strategic, loving foundation that makes every other form of guidance actually work. And now we arrive at the part of this conversation that most parenting content carefully avoids. The uncomfortable truth. The thing that sits beneath all of this. The real reason Japanese discipline philosophy is so difficult for Western parents to adopt is not logistical. It is not about time or resources or cultural difference. The real reason is this. This system requires the parent to change first. Not the child. The parent. Shitsuke only works if you yourself are consistent. Amae only works if you yourself are regulated. Kodawari, that inner standard, can only be transmitted if the child can actually observe it in you. And that is genuinely confronting because most of us were never given these tools either. We were raised in reactive households ourselves. We absorbed the anxiety, the inconsistency, the love that sometimes felt conditional on our performance. And we are now, with the very best intentions, passing on the exact patterns we swore we would change. This is not blame. This is one of the most important acts of self-awareness a parent can perform. Because the moment you see it, truly see it, you gain the ability to interrupt it. And that interruption, however imperfect, however gradual, is exactly what this philosophy makes possible. Let your child feel, without a single word, that this home has a standard, and that they are already part of it. If this gave you something real to think about, please share this video with a parent who needs to hear it. And if you want more on how the world's most thoughtful cultures raise emotionally intelligent, deeply grounded children, subscribe. Because we are just getting started.